I never thought I'd be in this situation, but here I am. I'm Lizzie, 24F, and I've been dating Caleb, 26M, for 3 years now. We met during our sophomore year in college when we were paired up for a group project in our marketing class. I remember being impressed by his creativity and work ethic right from the start. We spent countless nights in the library, working on our project and getting to know each other. By the time we presented our work, I was already falling for him. Caleb and I come from very different backgrounds. I grew up in a small town with my parents and 2 younger sisters. My dad owns a local hardware store, and my mom is an elementary school teacher. We didn't have much growing up, but we were happy. Caleb, on the other hand, comes from a wealthy family in the city. His dad is a successful lawyer and his mom is a pediatrician. Despite our different upbringings, we clicked immediately. After graduation, Caleb got a job at a prestigious marketing firm in the city, while I started working at a nonprofit organization focused on environmental conservation. We decided to move in together last year, pooling our resources to rent a small but cozy apartment downtown. It was a big step, but we were excited to start our life together. Caleb has a best friend, Philip, 27M, who he's known since high school. They were on the same basketball team and have been inseparable ever since. Philip is everything Caleb isn't: loud, boisterous, and a bit of a party animal. When I first met Philip at one of Caleb's basketball games in college, I was a bit taken aback by his crude jokes and flirtatious nature. But Caleb assured me that Philip was a good guy underneath it all, and I grew to accept him as part of our lives. Philip would hang out at our place pretty often, sometimes dropping by unannounced. At first, I found it a bit annoying, but I knew how important Philip was to Caleb, so I tried to be accommodating. Philip was always friendly towards me, often complimenting my cooking or asking about my work at the nonprofit. About 6 months ago, I started noticing Philip acting differently around me. It was subtle at first. He'd make comments about how good I looked in a particular outfit, or he'd find reasons to touch my arm or back when talking to me. I brushed it off initially, thinking it was just Philip being his usual flirty self. Things started to get more uncomfortable when Philip began showing up at our apartment more frequently, especially when he knew Caleb would be working late. He'd bring over beer or takeout, insisting on keeping me company. I didn't want to seem rude, so I'd let him stay, but I always made sure to keep a distance. One night, things took a turn for the worse. Caleb was out of town for a work conference, and I was home alone catching up on some Netflix shows. Around 9 p.m., there was a knock at the door. It was Philip, clearly already a bit drunk, holding a 6-pack of beer. He said he was in the neighborhood and thought I might want some company. Against my better judgment, I let him in. We had a couple of beers and started watching a movie. As the night went on, Philip kept inching closer to me on the couch. I tried to subtly create more space between us, but he wasn't taking the hint. Suddenly, during a quiet moment in the movie, Philip turned to me and tried to kiss me. I immediately pushed him away and told him to leave. The next day, Philip called me repeatedly. When I finally answered, he begged me not to tell Caleb. He said it was a drunken mistake and swore it would never happen again. I was torn. I didn't want to keep secrets from Caleb, but I also didn't want to blow up his friendship with Philip. After all, they'd been friends for over a decade. Against my better judgment, I agreed to keep quiet as long as Philip backed off. For a while, things seemed to go back to normal. Philip kept his distance, and I tried to forget the incident ever happened. I threw myself into work, taking on extra projects at the nonprofit. Caleb was busy with a big campaign at his firm, so we didn't see as much of each other as usual. I told myself that once things calmed down, I'd find a way to tell Caleb about what happened with Philip. But then last week, everything blew up. Caleb's firm was celebrating landing a major client, and they threw a big party. All employees were encouraged to bring their partners, and many brought friends as well. Of course, Philip was there. Throughout the night, I noticed Philip watching me. Every time I looked up, his eyes were on me. It made me incredibly uncomfortable. I tried to stay close to Caleb, but he was busy networking with colleagues and clients. At one point, I excused myself to use the restroom. When I came out, Philip was waiting in the hallway. He cornered me, saying he couldn't stop thinking about me, how Caleb didn't deserve me, and how we should be together. I told him to back off, but he grabbed my wrist and tried to pull me closer. Just then, Caleb walked around the corner and saw everything. The look on his face, a mix of shock, hurt, and anger, is something I'll never forget. He immediately shoved Philip away from me, and they got into a huge fight. There was yelling and pushing, and eventually, other people at the party had to pull them apart. The ride home that night was silent. When we got to our apartment, Caleb finally spoke. He demanded to know what was going on between Philip and me. I broke down and told him everything, about the night Philip tried to kiss me, about my decision to keep it quiet, about how uncomfortable I'd been feeling around Philip for months. Caleb was furious. He couldn't believe I'd kept this from him for so long. He said he felt betrayed not just by Philip, but by me as well. He stormed out of the apartment and didn't come home that night. Now everything's a mess. Caleb has been staying at his brother's place for the past few days. When he does come home to get clothes or other things, he barely speaks to me. Philip, on the other hand, won't stop trying to contact me. He keeps making new social media accounts to message me after I block him, alternating between apologies and declarations of love. I feel terrible for not telling Caleb right away. I really thought I was doing the right thing by trying to preserve their friendship. I was afraid that if I told Caleb, he wouldn't believe me, or worse, he'd blame me for leading Philip on somehow. Now I'm afraid I've ruined everything. I miss the life Caleb and I had before all this happened. I miss our lazy Sunday mornings making pancakes together, our evening walks in the park near our apartment, the way he'd surprise me with my favorite takeout after a long day at work. I'm scared that I've lost all of that because of one stupid decision. I don't know what to do. Should I have told Caleb about the first incident right away? Is there any way to fix this, or have I screwed everything up for good? How do I get Philip to leave me alone? I'm lost and could really use some advice. Update 1. It's been about a month since my last post, and a lot has happened. First, I want to thank everyone for their advice and support. Reading your comments really helped me gain perspective on the situation and gave me the courage to take action. After a lot of soul-searching, I realized I needed to take responsibility for my part in this mess. I couldn't change what had happened, but I could be honest about everything moving forward. I reached out to Caleb and asked if we could meet to talk. To my relief, he agreed. We met at a quiet coffee shop, neutral ground where we could have an open conversation without the memories and emotions tied to our apartment. I told Caleb everything, about the first incident with Philip, why I kept it quiet, and how I now realize that was a huge mistake. I explained how uncomfortable Philip had been making me feel for months, and how I'd been too afraid to speak up about it. Caleb listened quietly, his face a mix of emotions. When I finished, he was silent for a long moment. Then he started to talk. He told me how hurt and betrayed he felt, not just by Philip's actions, but by my silence. He said he felt like an idiot for not seeing what was happening with his supposed best friend. But he also admitted that he'd always known Philip could be a bit of a player, and he felt guilty for not taking my discomfort around Philip more seriously. We had a long, emotional conversation about trust and communication in our relationship. We both realized we had work to do, me in being more open and honest, even when it's difficult, and Caleb in being more attentive and supportive. In the end, Caleb said he wants to work things out, but it's going to take time to rebuild trust. He moved back into our apartment, but things are still tense. We're trying to establish new routines, cooking dinner together, watching a movie on Friday nights, to help us reconnect. As for Philip, things got worse before they got better. He kept trying to contact me through mutual friends, even showing up at my workplace once. It was incredibly stressful. I was constantly on edge, worried about when he might pop up next. I finally had enough and told him in no uncertain terms to leave me alone or I'd file for a restraining order. I also blocked him on all social media and asked our friends not to pass any messages from him. It was hard, especially knowing how it would affect Caleb's friendship with Philip, but I knew it was necessary for my own well-being and for any chance of salvaging my relationship with Caleb. Caleb and Philip's friendship is over, obviously. It's been hard on Caleb. They've been friends for so long and have the same friend group. Some mutual friends have taken sides, which has made social situations awkward. We've had to skip a few group gatherings to avoid drama. Caleb and I are taking things day by day. We've started seeing a couples counselor to work on our communication and trust issues. It's been helpful to have a neutral third party guide our conversations and give us tools to work through our problems. I've also been focusing on myself. I started taking a photography class I've always been interested in, and I'm spending more time with my own friends. It's been good to have some independence and not make my whole life revolve around this situation. I've been going on hikes with my college roommate on weekends, which has been a great stress relief. There have been some tough moments. Last week, we ran into Philip at a local bar. It was incredibly awkward and tense. Philip tried to approach us, but Caleb firmly told him to stay away. We ended up leaving early. The incident shook both of us and led to an argument when we got home. Caleb was frustrated that we had to leave, and I was upset that he seemed more concerned about the social awkwardness than my discomfort. I still feel guilty about how everything unfolded, but I'm trying to learn from my mistakes and move forward. I've started journaling as a way to process my thoughts and feelings. It's helping me understand myself better and identify patterns in my behavior that I want to change. Caleb and I are both committed to making this work, but we know it won't be easy. We're trying to be patient with each other and celebrate small victories, like having a disagreement without it turning into a big fight, or being able to laugh together like we used to. I'll update again if there are any major developments. Thank you all again for your support and advice. It's been a difficult journey, but I'm hopeful that Caleb and I will come out stronger on the other side. Update 2. It's been another couple of months, and I wanted to give you all an update on the situation. Things have been complicated, to say the least. Caleb and I continued with couples counseling, and for a while, it seemed like we were making real progress. We were communicating better, spending quality time together, and slowly rebuilding trust. We even started planning a weekend getaway to a nearby beach town, something we used to do regularly before all this drama. But then something happened that threw everything into chaos again. About 3 weeks ago, I received an email from Philip. The subject line read, "I'm sorry, please read." Against my better judgment, I opened it. In the email, Philip said he was truly sorry for everything and wanted to make amends. He wrote that he had been going through a tough time, he'd lost his job and gone through a bad breakup, and had acted out in ways he deeply regretted. He said he'd started seeing a therapist to work on his issues and wanted to apologize to both me and Caleb in person. He asked if the three of us could meet to talk things out. My first instinct was to delete the email and block Philip's address. But a small part of me wondered if this could be a chance for closure. I decided to show the email to Caleb and ask what he thought. To my surprise, Caleb said he wanted to hear what Philip had to say. I think part of him missed his old friend and wanted to believe that Philip had changed. Against my better judgment, I agreed to the meeting. We met at a neutral coffee shop downtown. At first, things were tense and awkward. None of us seemed to know how to start the conversation. Finally, Philip broke the silence. He apologized profusely to both of us, saying he had been in a bad place mentally and had acted out in ways he deeply regretted. He talked about his therapy sessions and how he was working on understanding his behavior and making changes. As the conversation went on, I started to feel uncomfortable. Philip kept looking at me in a way that made me uneasy, and some of his apologies seemed more focused on me than on Caleb. He talked about how much he valued our friendship and how he hoped we could all move past this. Caleb didn't seem to notice my discomfort, though. By the end of the meeting, he and Philip were reminiscing about old times and laughing together. Over the next couple of weeks, Caleb and Philip started hanging out again. It started with grabbing a quick lunch during work breaks, then progressed to watching sports games together. Caleb said they were rebuilding their friendship slowly and that Philip had really changed. But every time I was around Philip, I still got a weird vibe from him. He never did anything overt, but little things, lingering looks, standing too close, finding excuses to touch my arm or shoulder, made me feel like his feelings hadn't really changed. Once, when Caleb left the room to take a phone call, Philip leaned in and whispered, "I'm so glad we're all friends again. I've missed you." The way he said it sent chills down my spine. I tried to talk to Caleb about my concerns, but he accused me of being paranoid and holding a grudge. We had a big fight about it, with Caleb saying I was trying to control his friendships and that I needed to learn to forgive. He said that if I couldn't move past this, maybe I was the one who needed therapy. He stormed out and spent the night at Philip's place. Now I don't know what to do. Am I overreacting? Should I trust that Philip has changed and try to move past everything? Or should I trust my gut that says he's still not over his feelings for me? The whole situation has brought up old insecurities for me. In high school, I had a friend who ended up dating my boyfriend behind my back. When I confronted them, they both gaslit me, saying I was being paranoid and seeing things that weren't there. It took months for the truth to come out, and by then, my self-esteem was in shreds. I can't help but wonder if I'm letting that past experience cloud my judgment now. Caleb and I were doing so much better, and now it feels like we're back at square one. The beach trip we were planning is off the table. Instead of spending our weekends together, Caleb is often out with Philip or other friends. When we are together, there's a tension in the air that wasn't there before. I'm lost and could use some advice. Should I try to accept Philip back into our lives for the sake of my relationship with Caleb? Or should I stand my ground, even if it means potentially losing Caleb? How do I trust my own judgment when Caleb is so convinced that I'm wrong? Update 3. I want to thank everyone for their support and advice on my last update. Your comments really helped me see things clearly and gave me the courage to take action. After our fight, I took some time to really think about the situation. I went for long walks in the park where Caleb and I used to spend our Sunday afternoons, trying to clear my head and figure out what I really wanted. I realized that regardless of whether Philip had changed or not, I wasn't comfortable with him being in our lives. The trust was broken, and I didn't want to constantly be on edge or second-guessing things. I decided to have one final conversation with Caleb. I asked him to meet me at our favorite coffee shop, the place where we had our first date back in college. When he arrived, I could see the wariness in his eyes, but he sat down and agreed to listen. I started by apologizing for not being more open about my feelings earlier. I explained that my past experiences had made it difficult for me to trust my own judgment, but that I was working on that. Then I told him that while I understood he missed his friend, I couldn't continue in a relationship where I felt my feelings and concerns were being dismissed. I talked about how Philip's presence was damaging to my mental health and our relationship. I reminded Caleb of all the progress we'd made in therapy before Philip came back into the picture, and how quickly things had deteriorated since then. I told him that I needed him to make a choice, not between his girlfriend and his best friend, but between a healthy relationship and one filled with doubt and discomfort. It was a difficult conversation. Caleb was defensive at first, accusing me of making him choose and not being willing to forgive. But as we talked more, he started to see how the situation was affecting me. He admitted that he had been so eager to get his old friend back that he had been ignoring red flags. We talked for hours, revisiting the entire situation from the beginning. Caleb finally acknowledged that Philip's behavior had been inappropriate from the start, and that he should have taken my concerns more seriously. He also realized that his own desire to reclaim his old friendship had blinded him to the potential consequences. In the end, Caleb agreed that rebuilding a friendship with Philip wasn't worth risking our relationship. He promised to cut ties with Philip and focus on us. It was a relief, but I know it won't be easy for him. Losing a longtime friend, even one who's betrayed you, is never simple. As for me, I've decided to start seeing a therapist on my own to work through my trust issues and anxiety from this whole situation. I realize now that keeping quiet about the first incident with Philip was a result of my own insecurities and fear of conflict. I want to be stronger and more assertive in the future, both for myself and for my relationship. Caleb and I are taking things one day at a time. We're continuing with couples counseling and working on rebuilding our relationship. It's not perfect, we still have moments of tension or doubt. Sometimes Caleb gets quiet and distant, and I know he's thinking about the friendship he's lost. Other times, I find myself hesitating to share my thoughts, afraid of starting another argument. But we're both committed to making it work. We've started having weekly check-in conversations where we discuss our feelings openly. We've also been trying new activities together. We joined a cooking class and have been exploring different neighborhoods in our city on the weekends. Last week, we ran into Philip at a local restaurant. It was awkward, but Caleb firmly told Philip that while he wished him well, they couldn't be friends anymore. I was proud of Caleb for standing his ground, even though I could see how much it hurt him. I've learned a lot from this experience about the importance of trusting my instincts and communicating openly, even when it's difficult. I've also realized the value of setting boundaries and sticking to them, even when it's uncomfortable. Thank you all again for your support throughout this journey. Your advice and encouragement have been invaluable. I hope this update finds you all well, and I'll be sure to post again if there are any significant developments in the future.